Now he's leading up here with regard to teaching the disciples and to not fear, saying that whatever is hidden, whatever the enemy tries to cover up, all will come to the light, all will be exposed. We have nothing to fear, especially now with what we're hearing and happening globally. We're seeing things happening now on a huge level. And we're hearing such statements to these problems around the world. They're calling it a biblical crisis or a biblical epic or whatever. Isn't it interesting? It's amazing how in time of trial, unregenerate man will still turn to the Word of God, because the Word of God cannot be destroyed. The Word of God cannot be hid. It is God's revelation to man, whether we choose to believe it and read it or not. And Jesus says something very clear here in verse 27. Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light. And what you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops. Now, of course, what he's saying here in the context is that whatever the situation, whatever we're going through, or whether we're in the dark or we're being tested, we still have a message to proclaim, because it doesn't change. However we may feel or what we're going through, God's message of salvation, that good news of the gospel, doesn't change just because I don't feel very well, or I've fallen out with God, or I don't like what he's doing in my life at the moment. Whatever we're going through, the message doesn't change. That is the point. And so God has to teach us these deep things, doesn't he? They don't just come overnight. It's a lifelong walk with the Lord, learning, particularly in our trials, how to stand. Because that is the true test. We can proclaim the Lord on the housetops, on the top of the mountains. It's when we're being tried and tested. And that is where our faith matures and grows. I remember years ago going through a deep trial, and I felt as though God had left me. I had a little inkling, and that's all it is, of what Jesus must have felt in his flesh when he said, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" That was real to him in his flesh. And sometimes we go through experiences like that. And I remember God comforting me and speaking to me through that time. And he said to me, not in a visible voice, but in a very strong impression, "Son, I am actually closer to you now than ever you could realize."